I actually like it. I think he'll fit in pretty well because he might have been playing too much in Chicago this year. I don't know.
Appreciate you streaming on in here on Birds 365 on the JAKIB YouTube channel. Go ahead and hit that like button if you're so moved. Mac and Mac hanging with you. We've got two good guests coming your way next hour. Dave Zangaro of NBC Sports Philly is going to join us. And joining us right now is our guy, Martin Frank. We haven't had on in a couple of weeks. Good to see you, Martin. How you been?
Yeah, I've been pretty good. How about you guys?
I'm I'm doing well, Martin. We see each other every. But by the way, I get mixed up. Martin's a world traveler now. He's been to Italy this year, and now Sweden. Is that correct?
So yeah, I spent the bye week in Sweden. My daughter's studying there, and it was a good opportunity to visit her.
Yeah.
Damn, what the hell did you do in Sweden?
I saw a bunch of Vikings.
Hopefully there was a better group than showed up in Philadelphia in week 2.
Ouch! Shot on goal, McMullen taking purple people eater shot.
Yeah, I'm not in love with that team, even though they're 5-1. But one team that everybody in Philadelphia is in love with, besides the Phillies, it's not the Sixers. It's the 6-0 Eagles, and they got the big name, Martin Frank. They got the big name. They got the splash, Robert Quinn. 18 and a half sacks. Forget about the 1 sack in 7 games this year. But your immediate reaction to the trade of adding a veteran edge rusher to the mix?
I actually like it. I think he'll fit in pretty well because he might have been playing too much in Chicago this year. I don't know. I'm not exactly sure what the situation was, why he only had 1 sack.
He probably was playing too little because they don't have anything on the defensive line. It's amazing. They used to have Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks and Robert Quinn, and now they got nothing. Nothing.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think this would be a good situation for him in that regard because A, he doesn't have to play 68% of the snaps, and B, he's probably not going to get double teamed as much as he was in Chicago. And the idea is to add more depth on the defensive line so Brandon Graham doesn't have to play a ton. I think he's been like at 43%, something like that this year, which is good for him. He's playing well. And if by adding someone like Quinn, you can kind of keep him at that level. You can kind of reduce Quinn's playing percentage time, a little bit, keep all these guys fresh. I mean, you got to remember, Quinn is 32 years old. Graham is 34 years old. So, you don't want to wear these guys out before the playoffs start. I mean, I'm assuming, obviously, the Eagles are going to make the playoffs. So, this is a good way to add depth, keep everybody fresh, and keep them playing well. So I kind of like the trade. I mean, they didn't give up a whole lot, in a 4th-round pick and everything like that. So it was a good move for the Eagles.
You just made me think something that I hadn't put into the equation yet. How do you not? The Eagles, maybe due to preparation, maybe due to their overall mindset and philosophy, have not been hurt at all on the defensive line this year. They've been really healthy. It only takes one play for that to go by the wayside when a guy turns a knee, turns an ankle. All of a sudden, the guy's out of the mix. So if you have a guy like Quinn, you can speculate ahead of time how many snaps he's going to play per game, what's the breakout going to be. Or it can change drastically if somebody goes down with an injury. So you do have to factor that in. Everybody immediately wants to put a guy into the lineup, and he's going to be able to do that. He's going to be able to produce that. Well, you don't know about injuries because that changes the whole projection for everybody. And that's why you got to give Howie Roseman credit for this one, right, Martin?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was kind of, the issue, they lost Derek Barnett, in the first game of the year. And I think they wanted to work in Teron Jackson, but it just didn't seem like it was working out. I mean, even the game against the Cowboys, they pretty much went with the 3 guys and, Sweat, Graham, and, Hassan Reddick and stuff. Yeah. So, it was kind of, if they didn't do anything, it was kind of trending into a situation where Graham's going to have to play more and more. And, at a guy his age, he gets susceptible to injuries. He's only a year removed from his torn Achilles and stuff. And I think they were really concerned about him wearing down, over the rest of the season. And, what would he have left going into the playoffs if they didn't make this move? So I feel it was a good move for them. I feel like they got better, they got deeper. We're not getting the Robert Quinn of last season when he had the 18.5 sacks, or even the 1 year in Dallas where he had 11.5. But that's okay. I mean, if he gets a couple sacks, if he mixes in pretty well with the other guys, I mean, I think it'll work out just great.
Yeah, there's that balance you bring up. I mean, they had been working Patrick Johnson in a little bit, who's a young player. You mentioned Teron Jackson. They had to waive Teron. We'll see if he gets through waivers, and they'll probably put him back on the practice squad if they can get him through. But and then they gave up the 4th-round pick. So, and you mentioned the age. Brandon's 34. Robert Quinn's 32. Where's your feeling on hey, let's go for the Super Bowl versus we got to be careful with some of these young players. We got to develop them. We got to have them ready when we roll things over, so to speak. It's kind of difficult balancing act, but I'm in the hey, you're a legitimate contender. Go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. You only get so many chances. Like, everyone talks about, oh, they're a young team, they'll be good for a couple of years and stuff. Well, you don't know that. I mean, it's the NFL. Like, teams can get better in a hurry. You always see teams going from last place to first place and stuff. So, if you feel like you got something going, then you got to go for it. I mean, you go back to the 2017 season. Nobody expected the Eagles to be that good. I think they were like 7-1 at the break, and Howie said, hey, we're a Super Bowl team. Let's reward these guys and let's make a run for it. And he traded for Jay Ajayi. He gave him depth at running back. So LeGarrette Blount didn't wear down as the season went on. And then, as you saw in the playoffs, I mean, those two were a really good tandem. And I think a lot of that thinking went into that deal with Robert Quinn this year. I mean, they felt like, hey, we need some more depth. We got a good veteran guy. He's an upgrade over, a guy like Teron Jackson, a guy like Patrick Johnson. I mean, it would be asking a lot for those guys to take up a major role as the season went along. And obviously they've shown that, they're not quite up to that yet. So let's go get a proven veteran and, see where it takes us.
Should there be any concern? Because I look at this roster now and analyze the snap counts to this point, that Brandon Graham is going to be the guy who's going to pay for more snaps for a guy like Quinn as compared to the couple of young guys that one of which is no longer an Eagle that have been getting those snaps. Brandon Graham's been doing a great job. If you believe Pro Football Focus and their ratings, he's one of the best defensive ends in the National Football League. Do you really need to be reducing the reps of a guy who's one of the best players in the National Football League at his position?
Well, I don't think you're going to be reducing Brandon Graham's snaps all that much. I mean, he was playing like maybe 45% of the snaps.
Yeah,
and I think they want to keep
he's
him
on
there.
a pitch count because coming off the Achilles, his age. Eagles have done a good job with him. I'll throw in, since Jody said Brandon, I'll throw in Josh Sweat because for whatever reason, there's a lot. I'm not going to say everybody, but there's a lot of fans who don't realize Josh Sweat's a pretty damn good player. Josh Sweat is. I'm more concerned about him losing reps than Brandon.
I think Sweat will lose some reps, but that might not be a bad thing either. I mean, I'm not talking about like a significant reduction in snaps or anything like that, but maybe like 3 or 4 fewer snaps here, maybe take like 1 or 2 from Brandon Graham, maybe a couple here and there from Hassan Reddick. I mean, it can work. And, it's also not going to happen overnight. I mean, Robert Quinn's probably coming in today for his physical. I mean, I'm guessing he probably won't play Sunday, or if he does, maybe a few snaps here and there. But it could be like a gradual thing, as he gets used to the playbook, as he gets used to the defense. Maybe you bring him along a little bit slowly the first couple of weeks, and then you see where you are. I mean, maybe 2 or 3 weeks down the road, you look at it and say, All right. Well, we can give Robert Quinn a bigger role and stuff, and maybe we can take away a few snaps here and there from some of the other guys. You got to. There's a way to make it work, I guess, and that's going to be up to Jonathan Gannon to figure out. And that's why they have him as the defensive coordinator to figure out these things. So we'll see where it takes us. But overall, I mean, I think Robert Quinn, it takes some sacrifice from guys. And, we've seen BG over the years, like probably the most team
Yeah,
oriented
yeah.
kind of guy. So, I'm sure he'd be willing to make it work. And, he's not going to complain if they take away a few snaps here and there. And he's as much of a respected leader on the team that if other guys are starting to kind of wonder about that, he'll talk to them and everything like that. So, he'll make it work. He knows this is like probably his last chance and he wants a Super Bowl and he'll do whatever it takes. And that's one of the things that you have to also weigh when you make a trade like this is how it's going to react, with the other guys on the team and everything. So, a guy like Brandon Graham is like the last thing the Eagles are going to worry about, as far as bringing in someone like Robert Quinn. I mean, he'll make it work. He'll find a way and he'll make sure the other guys understand that too.
All right, Martin, everybody's going to be watching Robert Quinn and the guys in and out on the defensive line. As the first game after the bye, what should we all be focusing in on the offense? Anything different? Any change? Any change of philosophy as to how they do things? They're 6-0, and they're one of the better offensive teams statistically in football. They just come out and say, all right, we'll just keep doing what we're doing because we don't think you're going to be able to stop us. What should we be keeping our eye on the Eagles offense Sunday against the Steelers?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the season goes along, like teams are going to focus more on Jalen Hurts and they're going to focus more on trying to stop him and whether that takes like a spy or something like that. So, I mean, Jalen Hurts has to adjust to their adjustments. It's kind of like a pitcher and stuff. When you're like mowing everybody down, you keep doing it until the hitters adjust, and then you have to adjust. So, I think there'll be a little bit of that. I mean, they're still going to do what they do. I mean, if Jalen Hurts is on his game and he's hitting AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, I mean it's hard to stop no matter if you know it's coming or not. And then
Yeah.
you add the running aspect with him and Miles Sanders. So if teams load up to stop Hurts's running attack and stuff, then he keeps hitting like the other receivers and stuff like that. Otherwise, if they focus more on trying to shut down AJ Brown, well, you still have Devontae Smith, you still have Dallas Goedert, so they have a lot of weapons and they have a lot of options. So you would think if teams adjust to what the Eagles are doing well right now, they can find another way to get it done.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. Jalen never gives us a lot, but I thought it was interesting when he was talking about his bye that he specifically mentioned he sought out Jonathan Gannon and asked him, his self scout, how would you deal with me? How would you deal? How would you, as a defensive mind, stop with that? I think it seems like common sense, but I don't hear a lot of quarterbacks doing that. So I'm always impressed with the way Jalen Hurts goes about his business. But I want to shift gears, Martin, and talk about one thing Jody brought up, which is a good point. And that's the Eagles sort of having a big donut in next year's draft. So, they have the 2 first-round picks. They have a 2 or 3. Now they don't have a 4, 5, and 6 before they have 2 more in the 7th. They still need a safety, a backup safety. I think that's their weakest position. Especially if you saw Kayvon Wallace, those 16 reps when Chauncey Gardner-Johnson went down against Dallas. Backup running back we talked about. Backup tight end, but they started the practice window on Tyree Jackson. Maybe they're counting on that. You don't really have that mid-level pick now to go get a backup safety. Any concern, or do you think maybe an Andre Dillard might move, or are we done at the trade deadline? This is it.
Yeah. You mentioned obviously we saw the big drop off with Kayvon Wallace, last game and everything like that. And see, that's why like a lot of people say, well, they should trade Andre Dillard. You can get a mid-round pick for him and stuff like that. But then, you know, that would create an issue of depth on the offensive line, and I don't think the Eagles really want to test that. I mean, Jordan Mailata has pretty much already missed 2 games with an injury. Jack Driscoll filled in there. Lane Johnson missed the second half against the Cowboys with the concussion, and you saw like a similar drop off. And this is not a knock on Jack Driscoll, but he's not Lane Johnson. I mean, nobody is.
Nobody.
You know, there was a pretty big drop off there between, you know, when Lane Johnson went out and when Jack Driscoll took over in the second half. So, you know, you run that risk if you trade a guy like Andre Dillard, who is a decent backup. I mean, is a good backup. I mean, he's probably good enough to start on a number of teams. So, like, you know, if something happens to Mailata, you can plug in Andre Dillard and not really miss a whole lot. You know, the problem is Andre Dillard can't really play right tackle, so he's not like the swing guy necessarily. So yeah, I mean, it's a risk. I mean, if they do trade Andre Dillard, he would be the guy who would bring you one of those mid-round picks and kind of like lessen the gap and stuff like that between like their 3rd-round pick and their 7th-round pick. But at the same time, I mean, you can address those concerns in the offseason. I mean, yeah, Dillard will be a free agent, so you'll lose him for nothing. So, you know, on the other hand, you can be like, well, you know, at least now we can get something for him as opposed to not getting anything.
Right. Here would be my take on the whole Dillard thing. If you're not going to get a 2nd or 3rd round pick, if you're only getting a 4th round pick, well, that means you're getting nothing, because John just told me a 4th round pick was nothing that they gave up to Chicago. Well, would you accept nothing back in return for the safety net that is Andre Dillard?
Yeah, I mean, that's the question. I mean, if I'm the Eagles and I just made a trade for Robert Quinn because I'm going for the Super Bowl, you know, why would I trade Andre Dillard, who, you know, if something happens, can help us get to the Super Bowl? I mean, it's the same type of thinking. I mean, if you're all in, you're all in. So I personally don't think that Andre Dillard would be traded, but, you know, there are other ways, like in the offseason, they can find a way to get a 4th-round pick or a 5th-round pick or something
and
like that.
To clarify, nothing for the Eagles, because they're a Super Bowl contender. So that Super Bowl contender falls in. I don't give a flying, you know what, about a 4th-round pick when I'm a Super Bowl contender.
Right.
The 4th-round pick next year. But here's where it comes in with Andre Dillard. If you can do player for player, if you can do Andre Dillard for a backup safety somewhere around the league, some people have speculated Jonathan Abrams. I don't know if he's a fit for what the Eagles do, but if you could pull off a player for player trade and say, well, Jack Driscoll, yeah, you're right. I mean, he's not as good as Jordan Mailata or Lane Johnson or even Andre Dillard at left tackle, but he's better than Kayvon Wallace is as backup safety. So that's kind of where I'm weighing it. So if you can maybe get player per player with Andre Dillard, I think that might be a way to go. But I'm with you. If they don't get a 3rd-round pick for Andre Dillard, they're not going to trade him. Yeah, for draft capital.
Yeah, I agree.
You guys see this because you're down there. I think one of the things will influence the thought process on Dillard is Brett Toth, and when or if he's going to be ready. You say he's out there in practice, he's moving fine, he looks good. They haven't activated his window the same way they have with Tyree Jackson. Are we expecting Toth to not be a contributor this year, not be ready? Where do you think his status sits, guys?
I would say that probably not as a contributor. I mean, what has Brett Toth done like in his career? And he's coming off an ACL, so it's not like you can just plug in the guy and say, all right, you're the backup left tackle, you're the backup right tackle. I mean, he still needs to practice, he still needs a couple of weeks and everything. It's not like a plug and play type of thing with a guy like that.
I was seeing Brett was there yesterday taking mental reps, doing everything in the background. He looks ready, and I've talked to him a couple of times. I think the Eagles are just stashing him now because, you know, they don't have room for him. But obviously if if they moved Andre, they probably start his practice window, and then maybe he'd be more involved. Yeah, he's a versatile player, but Stoutland, he likes certain guys. Josh Navy Sills, for instance. I mean, nobody thinks about Josh Sills, but he loves him, and he thinks he's going to be a good player. And Stout usually deserves the benefit of the doubt. My thing about Dillard is you have so much depth on the offensive line. And, it's like I said with the Driscoll comp. Yeah, maybe he's not quite as good as Andre Dillard at left tackle, but he proved he could hold up when Jordan Mailata was down. And Kayvon Wallace kind of proved he couldn't hold up. So that's kind of my differential between those two depth positions. But anytime you lose good players, it's not going to be as good. So, I don't want to get Jalen Hurts upset. So I want to get one question in about the Pittsburgh Steelers, Martin Frank, because the Eagles do have a football game coming up this week.
Right.
And it's not the typical Steelers that we think of that have been so good since 1969. 3 coaches, 6 Super Bowls. All 3 coaches have Lombardi trophies. This is a bad Pittsburgh team. I was thinking about this. I could make a case, even going back to week 1, and Jody knows this. I thought Detroit was going to be tougher than people realized. I turned out to be right on that one. Now they crapped the bed since, as usual. Even Jacksonville coming in, I said, well, Doug, Trevor Lawrence, bad weather, who knows? I can't buy this team stinks. The Eagles should lap this team lap and a half. Is there any reason to be concerned with the Pittsburgh Steelers right now? I know Mike Tomlin's still evaluating, but
well, the one thing about the Steelers, they have really good wide receivers, and Kenny Pickett can run around a little bit. He's only played a couple games and everything. I don't think the Eagles have a book on him per se. If he gets some time to throw, he could hit his wide receivers. They can cause some problems for the Eagles. But other than that, I mean, the Steelers' offensive line is not good. TJ Watt is still out. I mean, I guess they opened his practice window, but I doubt if he's going to be activated.
They had the bye week after this game, so I don't think they're going to push him.
Right.
That would be the one concern if TJ Watt was back. But they have some good players. I mean, Minkah Fitzpatrick, who Jalen Hurts loves, obviously, is a really good player. Yeah. Cam Hayward's a really good player. Yeah. Najee Harris is a good player, running back. So maybe I'm overstating it, but I just don't think Kenny Pickett's ready to play. And anytime you have a quarterback, and remember, this is Mike Tomlin's 16th season, Martin. He's never had a losing season.
Right.
He's going to have
That's incredible.
Yeah.
Here's the one thing that scares me about this Sunday's match, and it's not much. I'm with you guys. I think the Eagles are going to win. They're probably going to win handily. But if there were one thing to jump up and bite them, as good as Bradbury and Slay have been through the first 6 games of the season, neither one of them is 6'2", and Chase Claypool is 6'4", and Pickens is 6'3". Now, is their quarterback good enough to throw those high balls that they can high point and go up and get uncontested plays against good Eagle coverage corners? You got to have a real good quarterback to be able to take advantage of something like that. And I don't know, Pickett is that guy right now.
Right.
But they do have a specific height advantage matching up their wide receivers against the Eagles DBs.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Steelers wide receivers. I mean, Pickens looks like he's going to be enough. Like, the Steelers have a knack for finding wide receivers in the draft. I mean, probably unlike any other team. I mean, you go back to Antonio Brown, was a 6th round pick. Deontay Johnson they got, I think, in the 3rd round. Pickens was a 2nd round pick. Claypool, another 2nd round pick. Tomlin was asked yesterday, you have any regrets about, not, because he went 4 picks before Jalen Hurts, and, the Steelers obviously have moved on from Ben Roethlisberger and stuff. So But I mean, Claypool's a good wide receiver. I mean,
Yeah, he
we
is.
saw 2 years
Yeah.
ago, he pretty much torched Nathan Gary for, the game-winning touchdown, in that game. Was it 2 years ago?
That's a bad coverage scheme. I like Jim Schwartz. Everybody knows, but that's a
Yeah, but I
bad
think like a
scheme,
lot
man.
of Eagles fans still have images of,
Yeah.
Claypool running past Nathan Gary and catching that 35-yard touchdown pass from Roethlisberger. So, I mean,
Yeah.
they have good receivers, and maybe Pickett's the guy who can, I just don't think that, it's Pickett's time yet. I still think he has a ways to go before he can take advantage of defenses the way Roethlisberger did. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, they have some weapons.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, anytime you lose a Hall of Fame quarterback, it's going to be difficult. Got to take your medicine for a few years. He is Martin Frank at MFrank NFL. Follow him on Twitter. Read him. DelawareOnline.com. The official paper of record for the President of the United States and Martin Frank. Happy Robert Quinn Day. I will see you in a few hours, Martin.
All right. Well, thanks for having me as always. Appreciate it.